All right, hey everyone, welcome to our real-time payments webinar. We are pleased by the large number of our partners, customers, banks, networks that decided to attend today. Our intention is to let you know what real-time payments are, where we sit in the RTP ecosystem, why we think it's important for you to do it, and how to do it. So if we can answer those questions, we've had a successful webinar, and so you can ask questions at the end, but during this session, we'll be answering those questions. RTP joins a set of our real-time money movement products. Today, and I'm sure everyone knows that I'm a huge advocate of push to card. We do a lot of that push to card to enable our partners to be successful. Real-time payments complements that. And our intention is to let all of our customers, all of our banks, choose the method that they want to use, whether it's a card or a bank account, to get money to their customers instantly. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Erin Andrea, who are our product leader, and she'll be going through details and introducing our special guest.
Thank you, Rodney, for kicking us off to a great start. I'd now like to introduce everyone to our special guest speaker, Keith Gray, who is the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at the Clearinghouse. During his 20-year career, Keith has worked with financial institutions of all sizes, as well as financial technology companies on emerging payment initiatives, mobile solutions, and online banking applications. Keith, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Keith. We're going to be starting with a fireside chat with our experts, Rodney and Keith, to take a closer look at the benefits of RTP, followed by a product pricing and roadmap overview, and then we'll wrap things up with a Q&A session with the audience. You can submit your questions at any time through the chat feature, upvote questions you like, and we will respond to them after that. So with that, let us dive right in and start learning about RTP. So our first fireside question for you guys is, starting with Keith, can you tell us what exactly is RTP in its simplest definition?
Yeah, sure. Simplest definition. So it was launched 3 years ago. At the time, it was the first new payment rail that we had launched here in the US for 40 some years since the ACH network was launched. So new payment rails, think new infrastructure that facilitates a range of new product development, like what TabaPay is doing with it. And it basically facilitates not only the immediate payment capability or the real-time payment capability, but also the facilitating the messages and the data traveling with the payment. So I would say in its simplest form, that it's a real-time messaging network that carries data and payment information direct from bank account to bank account, literally in seconds.
Thank you, Keith. That's a very helpful framework. Rodney, how would you define RTP?
I'm simpler. My simple explanation is a real-time payment to a bank account using a routing number and account number. And differentiate that with card, right? Card is about card and expiration dates, and bank account is about bank accounts. And so simplistically, that's what it does. It lets merchants or people send money to other bank accounts within the US instantly, okay?
Thank you, Rodney. Straightforward and simple. That makes perfect sense. It would be helpful to understand how RTP fits within the broader payments landscape. Rodney, how would you compare RTP to other instant payment networks like Visa Direct, MasterCard Send, and the FedNow?
So our partners, merchants and banks, have had great success with Visa Direct, MasterCard Send, the regional networks on dispersing funds. And we've noticed a lot of our customers use cards to disperse funds instantly, collect funds back. Real-time payments, and we still see a lot of activity over ACH as well. So they want to use cards for payouts today, cards for collections, and they do ACH for non-instant payments today. RTP fills a gap between instant cards and ACH, which is non-instant bank accounts. And so if you look at cards, it is ubiquitous coverage of US bank accounts, instant payouts. RTP, call it 60% coverage of dispersing to bank accounts real time. So we would expect some push to card volume to migrate to RTP, but not a lot. Frankly, we think push to card is an excellent solution, but we think some of the ACH credit volume that is used today will go to RTP. RTP has similar advantages to cards, where you send a message, get a response back. So if you want to decide if that customer's bank account is real and you have their routing number and DDA, send a real-time payment to it. It's inexpensive. It can replace ACH credits. It's not ubiquitous, but 60%. So keep your cards where they are. It's a great solution on Visa Direct and MasterCard. And we hope to move a lot of the ACH next day, same day volume over because RTP is a superior solution. It is instant. You get a response back right away and that customer has the funds and use the bank credentials. Okay, Aaron?
Thank you. That really helps to clarify how RTP fits within the landscape. Keith, do you have any follow-up comments that you'd like to share?
One of the unique advantages of RTP is that it goes all the way through clearing and settlement. There is no secondary clearing and settlement that has to happen later or behind the transaction. So from start to finish, that transaction is complete, and both sides of the equation, the sender and the receiver, know the fact it's out of my account, it's into yours, or it's out of my business account into my merchant account, or vice versa, and the money is immediately available. There's no waiting for funds availability. So.
Thank you. Those insights are really helpful to clarify the value add of RTP. RTP is certainly making a big splash in the market. Payments.com recently said that 2021 will be the breakout year for RTP. So let's talk about why that is. Keith, starting with you, can you tell us what's new and exciting about RTP for the industry?
Well, I feel like we've been breaking out for a few years. We launched this thing in 2017, and we've gone from dozens of transactions on day one to literally millions now. And Rodney mentioned the 60% coverage of the network. That'll grow to 70 or 80% by the end of the year is what we're targeting. So as far as new and exciting, what we're seeing now is, once we hit that 50% plus coverage across the country, that means 50% plus, it's about 58% coverage now. Once we hit that 50% plus number, a lot of companies really started to invest in the infrastructure for applications and application development. There's a host of companies using the network that you're probably using now that you may not even aware that it's riding on top of RTP. So we're seeing a lot of cool application development, a lot of consumer usage and business usage of the application. And I think that's definitely going to continue to grow.
Thank you. Yeah, application development does sound exciting. Rodney, how about your thoughts on what makes RTP so appealing to the industry?
Again, it solves a need for bank accounts, right? And so if you look, pushing instant credit to bank accounts, we see a lot of challenge deposits going out, a lot of small dollar disbursements where the payment networks may be too high priced. But RTP is priced at a point where you can get that small dollar instant credit to a bank account immediately, which is important. And if you look at push to cards is ubiquitous and RTP at 60%, it may not displace that much push to card. But what we think the real game changer is in RTP is this request for payment. We do quite a bit of account funding today for various digital banks and regular banks. And I'm sure everyone's experienced some fraud where you debit a debit card, say at B of A, and try to fund your digital bank account. The request for payment will solve this, right? And so with the clearinghouse request for payment, where you can request money, instantly get a response back, and have those funds in the beneficiary account, you have a risk-free, low-cost way to load accounts. And so RTP, while great on dispersing, we think the real game changer comes in the request for payment, which is available at just a couple banks today, but other banks are going to be adopting it shortly. Okay.
So it's exciting because it solves market needs and it's cost effective, and we have some game-changing features like RFP. So can we take a closer look at what's driving this excitement even further? Keith, what industry trends do you see that are pushing merchants to RTP?
So, and what we've seen, and especially over the past year and a half with the pandemic, is in the merchant community and the small business community in general, cash flow is king now, more than it ever was, and it was always a pretty big deal, right? What RTP enables is not only the immediacy of the funds, but the predictability of it. And the 7-day access to it, we found is a big deal as well. Actually, if we look at the network volume trends, the highest time frame and day and time frame of when RTP is really cranking the most volume is Friday afternoons after close of business. And a lot of that is business and small business and consumer and payroll type transactions. And it allows those funds to be available immediately where you need it and when you need it. And it's not only about the immediacy, but it's about the complete predictability of it. If you need to pay a bill and it's due at midnight tonight, you can kick that off at 11:59 and you can know it's done with literally in seconds. So you get to keep the cash as long as you want because you know you have immediate access to it and can get it to where you want it. A lot of wallets are using the RTP network to allow you to pull money out of your wallet-based account, like the Digits of the world, which is a savings app, and put it back into your bank account. Again, when you know you have access to your funds, when you need it, where you need it, it really provides the infrastructure to support the way people and businesses do business and live their lives.
It's great to stress predictability and certainty. Everyone thinks instant, fast, but there's certainly many other benefits to RTP as well. Thank you, Keith. Rodney, what are your thoughts on industry trends that are leading merchants to sign up for RTP?
So I think that, as Keith said, certainly the Friday phenomenon that everyone on the phone experiences, whether it's consumer advances, business advances, payroll, et cetera, drives the Friday volume. We think RTP is going to move another segment that's not moving today to Visa Direct, which is the real small dollar stuff. And so we have inquiries from quite a few companies that do a lot of small dollars, whether it's small dollar rebates, small dollar challenge deposits. We see this small dollar stuff moving off of ACH credits to RTP. And we see that as the first wave of this thing, okay?
That makes sense. So with all this momentum, it sounds like market support of the RTP system is well underway. And Keith, you've shared a little bit about, RTP's progress to date. What else can you tell us?
So as far as some of the things that you'll see coming this year, and Rodney mentioned the request for pay capability, and we see that as a key component as well. And initially, phase one of this for many of the banks and their customers was getting on the network and enabling funds to be received and sent on the network. Now they're getting into more advanced capabilities like that request for pay capability, which, as Rodney says, it could be a game changer from an industry standpoint. And the potential is huge because it touches many application capabilities where a biller can send a request for payment that includes not only the request, but the information you need about that request, as well as where you want him to put the money, right? So the consumer can get this request for payment and shoot, it's due tomorrow, click here, and the money gets put where the merchant wants it to immediately, because all that necessary information is included within that message set. The promise of RTP has always been faster payments, and I believe we've done a really good job as an industry with that, just judging by the volume over the network now. But it also is smarter and safer payments as well. So you're going to be seeing just an improved payment ecosystem as more and more of these applications get built out, frankly, through partner companies like TabaPay and many others who are leveraging this new innovation rail for a host of different type of development that really benefits the merchants, the consumers, businesses, the whole ecosystem of our payments world, I would say.
Yeah, it sounds, crossing the chasm is the hardest part of building a product success, and it sounds like RTP has sailed right through it. Keith, is there anything else you'd like to share about what's on the RTP roadmap for 2021?
Yeah, in addition to a lot of focus around a request for payment driven bill pay initiative, which will be filtering down to the consumers as we go through this year, as more and more banks launch that capability. One of the things we also wanted to do is provide increased capabilities relating to allowing merchants to share information with their customers. And we do that by providing a document warehouse capability or a document library. So if you're a merchant and you want to send an invoice or a bill to a customer, you can upload that bill to a deposit to this deposit warehouse, and then send a request for payment with a link to that site where I get the request for payment, and I click to it and I see the invoice pop up. The merchant doesn't have to provide that storage for that information. We have that as a stand aside next to the RTP network, which really improves that whole request for payment capability and information sharing between businesses. So think of a large corporate paying a small business or vice versa, the same thing. It really allows them to leverage that type of thing. We're also launching the tokenization capabilities. Most of us use tokenization now if we're using Apple Pay or Google Pay. All of that is based on having a token on your device as opposed to your real credit card number. The same thing is going to apply with RTP as it relates to token, where a customer can have a token that's easily turned on, turned off, limits set around, really securing that transaction all the further. So not only faster, but smarter and safer payments as well. A lot of the product initiatives we're doing fall in one of those three categories.
That's exciting. Thank you for sharing your vision. There are different ways to connect with the clearinghouse, and TabaPay has a unique solution for our customers to connect. So Rodney, what would you say is unique about TabaPay's RTP solution?
So I think we're probably a unique provider in that today merchants can enable RTP, or our partners can, by connecting to us, and we will let them originate these RTP push credits. We also connect to banks, and so we enable the receive side of banks. So I know a lot of our merchants are dual, where they have both a program where they service merchants through, say, advances or loans. They also offer cards. And so imagine TabaPay can enable both the origination of those credits today to a merchant's borrowers, as well as enable the receipt of instant funds to the merchant's card that they issue. And as a bank, we can deliver the solution, enabling both the receipt of funds to the banks or the merchants' cards and accounts, as well as the origination of the funds as well. And we think this puts us in a unique position to help enable this ecosystem across a broad array of banks that have multiple issuers. I know that some of the banks we operate at have many, many different prepaid and DDA programs across lots of processors. The challenge they'll have is enabling all these processors, all these accounts to receive money. And so we can enable all those accounts to receive money instantly at the same time, letting them originate. And so that puts us in a unique spot in the market. Okay.
And can you tell us more? What are some of the use cases for RTP, and how will it benefit merchants?
So we think right away, we think moving some of the push to card volume on the smaller dollar activity to RTP will frankly just save merchants money. It'll also enable merchants to accept the credential that the customer has, right? In many cases, I mean, cards work great. I've been a card advocate for 10 years on push to card. Some customers just want to use their bank account. And to enable an instant push credit to a bank account and then collect back on that account makes perfect sense. We hear all the time from our lending customers that they want to use the same account to get paid back on and receive the money. Cards work great, push to card, pull from card. With RTP, these lending use cases, these advanced use cases can now instantly credit an account through the bank account and then collect back with that same credential, minimizing fraud, minimizing risk of return and chargebacks. So we think that'll be one of the initial uses with the small dollar stuff we discussed earlier. Okay, and then what's really exciting, of course, is the request for payment. And you can imagine a case of reducing the cost of loading funds, the cost of getting paid back from cards, where you may present the customer the bank. What bank do you bank at? And if they pick Citibank, for example, then our merchants can do a request for payment to their Citibank account to get a risk-free payback or a risk-free load from that Citibank account. If it's not Citi, ask for their card information as an example. So there's very innovative ways to drive a user into a request for pay, risk-free, low-cost option that will, of course, work with our merchants on as they roll this out. Okay.
Sounds like there are a great many use cases for RTP, and I'm sure that the market will continue to find innovative ways to use it. So let's move on to a critical question on the benefits of RTP. Let's talk about security. So Keith, how does RTP help protect merchants and banks from the payment industry struggles with fraud?
Now, one of the things we've seen, and we've been very aware of the need of a bank grade secure network, right, for processing transactions. One thing we've learned is that, faster payments doesn't have to equate to faster fraud. However, you have to be aware of when the transaction hits our network, the money's gone, it's been delivered, it's too late to catch it then. You have to catch it on the front end. So, so what that does, one of the big advantages of the network in this area is there is no debit capability. And since everything's completely visible as the transaction goes, and the sender has to initiate the transaction, you can't pull it from my account. I have to send it. What that does is it reduces one area of fraud, which is one of the large areas around the debit, people not having visibility into their account, money gets pulled out of the account, they're not familiar with why, or they don't know why. That can't happen with the RTP network, but it puts more importance on the know your customer routines, on making sure it's Keith on the other end of that browser or that device. So a lot of the biometrics, the know your customer things that FIs are doing, really have a lot of importance as it relates to, validating it on the front end, because once it hits the network, by definition, it's too late at that point.
There again, creating improved efficiencies and certainties within the payment market. Rodney, what are your thoughts on the security benefits for RTP for our customers?
So bank accounts are as important to protect as cards. What we hear from our merchants, though, is that cards are hard for them to receive and store because of this whole payment card industry data security standard, the whole PCI cloud over cards. There's no such cloud over RTP. Merchants need to protect bank accounts just like they protect cards. The difference is they don't have to get audited with a PCI audit. And so both require security, both require safety. One requires an audit, one doesn't. And so, we'll just see how this changes the industry, but an instant payment credential must be secure, okay?
Moving away from that heavy lift is definitely a big benefit. So before we wrap up our fireside chat and move into a product walkthrough, starting with Keith, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share on RTP?
No, it's exciting. On behalf of the industry, it's a very exciting time because for the longest time, we didn't have the payment infrastructure in place to support the way, people live and work these days. Everything is very immediate focused. Everything is very interconnected, where customers want whatever device or application they're using to be completely accessible and have access to their cards, like Rodney was saying, and other payment type vehicles, right? So we didn't have the infrastructure in place until we launched RTP to support that. People expect immediate, they expect things to work seamlessly in a real-time environment. And it's as more and more companies like TabaPay and many of the FIs and many other technology companies, the product development now is riding on top of that infrastructure. You have to have the infrastructure first to facilitate the innovation and the product development. And more as we move through this year, there's you're going to see a lot of new product announcements around this. Zelle running on top of RTP, a lot of cool business to business use cases. Venmo uses RTP. There's a Grubhub and Uber and a host of others. You don't see RTP. It's facilitating that type of innovation underneath it, though, and that's going to be it's going to continue to be kind of an exciting time as we roll through 2021.
That is exciting. Thank you, Keith. Rodney, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share?
Just one message to all of our partners, and that is, let's go. This is ready. We'd love to work with you on enabling, really to help your business, either lower cost or enable faster payments for some of your other business lines. But this is ready to go. So we'd love to work with you on getting this done, whether you're an advanced company, a lender, you want to do faster merchant settlement, or you're a bank that frankly wants to enable your card programs to receive and your merchants to be able to send. We'd love to work with you. My message is let's get going. Okay.
Great. Thank you both so much for your expert insights. And now we're going to move into a product walkthrough, talk about pricing and the TabaPay roadmap so that interested customers know what the next steps are. And please feel free to toss in questions at any time in the chat feature, and we'll begin addressing them shortly. So I'm going to share my screen. One second. Okay. So let's start. We learned a lot about what RTP is and how it benefits the market. So how does supporting RTP through TabaPay actually work for you? And let's walk through an example flow of asynchronous RTP requests submitted and processed in real time. As Rodney mentioned, there are many potential use cases across multiple channels, such as enabling lenders and early wage access providers to offer real-time funding services. So let's say Lender Alpha wants to send funds to an end user, and Lender Alpha wants this end user to have immediate access to funds. So as an originator or sender, Lender Alpha would send an RTP credit transfer to TabaPay, and then the TabaPay would then send that request to the RTP system. That system validates the payment and ensures the originator has sufficient funds in their pre-funded account. And I'll go into more detail about how funding works on the next slide. In essence, this step is the heart of the clearing and settlement process. And then the RTP system sends the validated credit transfer request to the end user's receiving FI, and the receiving FI validates the account, sends an accept response back to the RTP system, and makes funds immediately available to the end user. The RTP system settles the accepted payment, confirms with the receiving FI, and sends a response to TabaPay, and then we send that response back to the originator or sender. And a question that might come to mind is, okay, so RTP coverage, as we've learned, supports about 57% of DDA accounts and counting in the US. So how do I know before I even go down this path if a transaction is eligible for RTP? Well, you can use our bank query API and before submitting a credit transfer request to determine if a routing number is eligible. And also the clearinghouse keeps an updated list of routing and transit numbers and the financial institutions that participate. So the number one question is, how can these payments be real time? And the secret sauce is pre-funding. A pre-funded balance account is required for each participant on the sending side. So each participant has a ledger account that's tied to this jointly owned pre-funded balance account, and the clearinghouse is the sole agent. During the credit transfer flow, the RTP system ensures that there are sufficient funds available. And since the funds are guaranteed, the credit transfer request can be processed and settled in real time. In essence, the sender's net position goes down and the receiver's goes up. This is also known as a real-time gross settlement model. And pre-funding minimums are determined by the clearinghouse based on asset size and volume. There's supplemental funding options available and watermark trigger alerts and a management portal for checking balances and dispersing funds with the clearinghouse. And once a payment is sent, it's final and irrevocable. There are options to address any issues, like if Lender Alpha says, hey, my customer sent that payment through by mistake, then a request for a refund can be submitted through TabaPay to the receiving FI. And one final note on the exchange of funds, RTP participants can charge their customers fees for the service, but those fees cannot be collected out of the principal amount of the RTP payment. And the funding details can seem a bit daunting at first, but with TabaPay's model, we would manage the complexities on your behalf. And also the clearinghouse has an excellent pre-funded settlement model user guide available on their website. And as you're thinking about how real-time payments can add value to your service offering, here are some key features to note. RTP leverages the well-known and standardized ISO 222 financial services payment structure, which streamlines the market and opens the door for incremental innovation. RTP is for push payments only, not for pulling funds from an account. And those push payments must be domestic transactions processed in US dollars. You can push up to 100K per transaction, and that, to note, is 2 times as high as the card transaction limit. You don't have to go that high, of course, on the sending side, but on the receiving side, FIs need to be prepared to accept up to 100,000. And as we reviewed on the previous slide, thanks to the pre-funding model, funding of the credit transfer is guaranteed and processed in real time. Looking at the future state of RTP, request for payments, as Rodney and Keith have been talking about, is a game-changing feature because various businesses, especially small vendors, freelancers, gig workers, can protect their cash flows by getting paid immediately. And that RFP message allows senders to instantly reach out to their clients with billing information and prompt them to send a payment over the RTP system. This feature links immediate payment capabilities with invoicing, which helps encourage customers to pay quickly. And if the request is accepted, the payer would make an RTP payment in real time using the credit transfer flow that we just walked through. So let's take a quick look into how it works.
Let's look at this new system in action. Here's Joe, who owns a successful seafood restaurant. He is adding a lobster special to his menu, so he needs to order more fresh lobsters from his supplier. Joe places the order with the lobster supplier. The supplier sends a request for payment through the payment system. Joe receives the invoice with the option to pay now. Joe presses the Pay Now button, and his payment for the lobsters is immediately sent to the supplier's bank account. The supplier's bank confirms to both parties that payment has been received. The lobster supply company sends a message back through the system to confirm the lobsters are on their way. Another example.
Bear with me for a second while I go back to my Bluetooth audio.
Is available through the Clearinghouse RTP system today. And as market support for RFPs continues to grow, it's on TabaPay's roadmap to support this feature to meet that market demand. At TabaPay, we price using a transparent cost-plus model, charging our customers a simple TabaPay fee plus pass-through fees. Our standard fee for instant payments for both RTP and card is 25 cents with discounts available based on volume. As an example, on a $100 transaction, you could expect to pay just under 30 cents for RTP all in and around 50 cents for card all in. We also use one agreement for all transactions, RTP, ACH, and card, so there's no need to set up a special agreement for RTP. And you can reach out to our sales team to talk about pricing in more detail. And let's talk about how to get started. RTP's momentum is growing, and TabaPay would love to work with you to hit the ground running. We can provide you with sandbox access next week, and our initial launch with existing customers is scheduled for late April. We encourage you to please reach out to our support or sales team to learn more, and we'd love to work with you. And in the meantime, the weekend is coming up, so if you'd like to grab a coffee and dive into the details further, the Clearinghouse has a wealth of information available on their document library in their RTP section. And you can also familiarize yourself with the TabaPay API transactions so you can see how bank account is integrated in addition to RTP supporting features. So with that, I'm going to touch base with our head of marketing, Catherine Lee, to see what questions may have come in, and we will kick off the Q&A. It's not too late to share your questions in the chat box feature as well.
Great.
Catherine,
Thank you,
how's it
Erin.
looking? Thank you.
It's good. We're getting a few questions in. We would now, so we're going to open up for audience Q&A. At the screen below, you'll see a Q&A chat function, so you'll be able to ask your questions there, and we will be able to ask any of our panelists. And so the first question, which I think some of you guys answered, is in terms of fraud. So RTP handling cases of fraud. Maybe Keith, can you talk a little bit more about how that works? And I know you discussed sort of making sure that you're doing KYC up front. Maybe can you talk in a little bit more detail? The question is around instant settlement seems to be maybe a better avenue for fraudsters. How do we sort of handle that on the settlement side?
Yeah, and again, we haven't seen that on the network, and you would never say there's no fraud on the network, but there's not any measurable fraud on the network at this point in time. Each individual sending institution, so the sending financial institution has the liability for the transaction. And it's up to that institution to determine how they manage and control any potential fraud within their organization, right? So whatever tools they deploy, we don't dictate what type of tools that an organization would use. We help to provide data that feeds into these tools on the back end as to help these systems learn moving forward. But again, the more of the story is, it's about the front end of the transaction and catching it before it hits the network.
Great, thank you, Keith. And for Rodney, any sort of thoughts on fraud and how merchants can better handle the fraud, either on the front end or during the transaction for RTP?
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. So Keith is right. It's about managing fraud on the front end. That being said, fraud happens, particularly with some of our lending merchants, advanced merchants. There's always account takeover, receiving money, stolen identity, stealing money. The bottom line is that it's very similar to cards, where if you send a disbursement and you didn't want to do that, you can't pull everyone back, but you can certainly put a request for reversal in. And it may be similar to the card networks where it's an irrevocable transaction, but the clearinghouse lets us communicate with the receiving FI, explain the fraud situation, and try to get the funds back. I think you'll find it very similar to how the card networks work, where if there's a good explanation, request reversal will be approved by the receiving institution, unless, of course, the funds are gone. So absolutely protect the front end, but we're here to help submit the request for reversal if it comes down to fraud. Okay.
Thank you, Rodney. Okay, next question is from David Berkowitz. The question is more around launch plans for new customers. I know, Aaron, you touched a little bit on existing customers. So maybe I'll give it over to you, Rodney, for launch plans for new customers.
Yeah, well, we intentionally want to have April be the launch month for our existing customers. The reason is I've been talking about RTP for 2 years. It's finally here. And there's contracts and things like that we have with our existing customers that make it easy there with our current API, which again is fairly straightforward at RTP. April is our existing customers. New customers can launch in May, and that's the timeline. We put new customers on contracts, et cetera, in April, and then in May they'd be able to launch. But our existing customers were reserving it before. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you, Rodney. Okay, next question is on comments on the transaction limits set by individual participants. I know that currently the limit is 100,000, but that differs by individual participants. Is it possible to talk a little bit about what it looks like for individual participants? And I'll give it over to Keith to answer that question.
Yeah, so when we launched in 2017, the limit per transaction limit was 25,000. Last year we moved it to 100. And again, this was the first real-time payment network launched here in the US. So it was very much a walk before you run kind of a launch model as it relates to transaction limits. So we moved to 100. There's some pressure or some discussion to move to higher than that from a network limit standpoint. The financial institutions that are on the sending side can set the limit at whatever they want under the network limit, and it can be by customer, by merchant, however they want to do it. I would say that kind of where things are moving because of more and more large corporates wanting to use this and applications around the title space and mortgage space where you need a higher limit than 100,000 per transaction is going to move it probably to 1 million in the foreseeable future. But again, that's the network limit. It can be set whatever lower than that you choose, and I think that's probably where we're headed.
Great, that's great news. Okay, so our next question is from Zev. It's on international support. Can we talk a little bit about international availability or any plans for international expansion? So I'll kick it over to Keith and then Rodney to share a few words.
Yeah, So when we launched the network, from a technical standpoint, we wanted to make sure the network we built could easily interoperate with other real-time payment networks around the world. So we launched with, it's called ISO 20022 messaging. It's an international standard for payments and data movement. Right now, and since we launched, we are domestic only payments from one domestic FI to another domestic FI account. That's a business decision though, as opposed to a technical limitation. And I would say at some point, we'll start looking into making our network interoperable with others around the world.
Perfect. Thank you, Keith. Rodney, any comments on that?
Yeah, so the path to international, quick international, is through our unified API. We're integrating with Visa's unified API, particularly the Earthport product, to allow disbursement to bank account internationally. And many countries support instant payment to bank account through that Visa unified product. And so our intention, and what is right after RTP, is international bank accounts, where through our API, through our single contract, through our single bank relationship, you'll be able to push to card US and international. You'll be able to push to bank account US internationally. Instant US, international would be instant if the country supported it. So again, the clearinghouse, awesome. I think Canada may be the next country, but we'll let Keith. But the quick path to international bank account instant disbursement will be through our TabaPay bank relationship connecting to the Visa Earthport API. Okay.
Perfect. Sounds like there are great plans for international expansion. So the next question is around pre-funding. It sounds like there are some questions here. So can you talk a little bit more about how the pre-funding works? And one question here is, does a pre-funding have to be with a TabaPay partner bank, or as long as our bank is on the RTP network, is that sufficient? And then more separately, as a merchant, do I need to make sure my account is pre-funded with TabaPay? What do I need to provide TabaPay? So I'll kick it over to Rodney.
Yeah, so this is, Visa, when we do push to card, we require a pre-fund as well. Every now and then we get a call from a merchant on a Sunday that says, I'm going to be a little short. I need you to spot me some money on Sunday so I can keep the business going Sunday. And we do that quite frequently for our merchants. RTP is a little different, right? Visa and MasterCard settle the day after. RTP requires you pre-fund. The difference is I can spot money to a merchant on a Sunday and pay for that on Monday. With the clearinghouse, we have to put money at the Fed in the bank's sub account in advance. So we have no way to spot that. The merchant can disperse every dollar in their account, but they have to have money in their account at the originating bank, because that originating bank puts equivalent number of dollars up at the Fed. And so we track the balance in the merchant account. When that goes to zero, they have to stop RTP. We have no way to advance that merchant money. So they have to have a pre-fund in their account, and then our bank puts money up at the Fed based on the amount of money in the merchant account. So that it's just a really hard, fast rule on the pre-fund. Okay.
Thanks, Rodney. And then just a clarification on the actual bank. Does a pre-fund have to happen at a TabaPay partner bank, or can it be just a bank on the RTP network that is not a TabaPay partner bank?
There have to be good and available funds in the origination bank, which is the TabaPay partner bank. And just so we're enabling a CBW Bank in Kansas. They've been a long partner of me personally, one of the most innovative banks, very small but innovative bank. And we're opening accounts for merchants at that bank initially. They have to pre-fund at that bank. The beauty of RTP, of course, is if you have an account at an RTP-enabled bank, you can instantly move that money to your CBW account. So you have to have the money at CBW, but if you have your money at another RTP-enabled bank, you can do an instant transfer up to $100,000 to your CBW account during the day. And that's how the plumbing will work. But your money has to be at the bank, okay?
Yeah, and relating to that $100,000 limit, Rodney, That's per transaction. You can send 5. If you want to send 500,000, send 5.
Hit the
It'll
button.
take you 15 seconds, but you can send
Yeah.
5 transactions.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect. And Keith, just to clarify, are there any daily limits?
No,
Or this is just by transaction limits? Perfect.
it would be
Okay,
set by whatever from a network standpoint. No.
great. Okay. And then just on that, in terms of bank launch, Rodney, so I know we're going to start with CBW to begin with. Is the plan to also have other TabaPay banks supporting this? What does that sort of plan look like?
Yeah, we're working with quite a number of banks now. You know, the banks that we do card processing at, the CBW Bank is first up. If you look at the challenge banks have, it's on the receive side. CBW Bank's in a unique position that they have primarily an origination bank. We originate from there today, but they have very few deposit accounts. So enabling CBW for receipt is simple. There's not a lot of work to do, so they can launch first. Other banks will come online, you know, in a rollout plan shortly after, and we can work with each of the banks to publish that plan. But we're working with other banks now. But right now, CBW Bank, in at least the TabaPay universe, is one of the few banks in town, the bank in town that we can go with today. And they would love, every merchant on this phone, they would love to service with RTP.
Perfect. Okay, great. And then a question for Keith is just in terms of sort of the competitive landscape, do you see RTP eventually replacing ACH? Where do you see sort of that relationship?
Now, there will always be a need, and we run one of the, you know, we run an ACH network, the Fed runs one, and the two interoperate, right? So we're not trying to get rid of ACH. Now, it depends on the use case and the need, right? You know, if you want the absolute lowest cost transaction and you don't care when the money shows up, ACH will always be the best solution for that. However, when you need the additional capabilities, the immediacy and the certainty and the real-time nature of RTP, you would go with RTP. Now, as it relates to same-day ACH, like Rodney was saying, there's definitely, you know, from a price comparison standpoint, there's not the difference between regular ACH as far as same-day ACH goes. So I think a lot of the transactions that are moving now same day ACH will roll to RTP it's just easier and works better, frankly. But in general, no, it just depends on the use case. There will always be use cases for very low cost transactions with no time dependency. And the two networks will live together as they do now. Perfect.
Okay. Sounds like there's room for both. And Rodney, I'll kick it over to you as well to answer that question.
I do think that you'll see significant same-day volume over to RTP, particularly when you get a real-time response back plus real-time. And I think, frankly, the price is lower. Doesn't the Fed charge an extra nickel for a same day? And RTP's 4.5 cents. So you have a better product at a lower cost. It just makes sense to move.
Great. Thank you, Rodney. Okay, next question is actually on the transaction flow that we had shown during the presentation. And the question is regarding networks. So where do networks play in this transaction flow? And I'll give this question to Erin.
So from a network standpoint, go back. We don't need to reshare the slide. So TabaPay is sitting within this flow in the same place that a sender FI would sit in the standard flow. So you would have a third-party service provider like TabaPay sitting in to help facilitate between different types of originators and the RTP system to get to the receiving side. But the TabaPay entity could also be an FI or another entity, if that helps clarify.
Very helpful. Okay, and then maybe I'll also hand that question to Keith as well. Where do you sort of see the networks play in this flow, if at all?
So on the RTP network, because money moves immediately from one DDA account to another DDA account, there's always a sending FI and a receiving FI, with the sending FI having the liability for the transaction. Now, in many cases, that sending FI will designate a company like TabaPay, giving them the ability to put transactions on the network on their behalf. We have a host of companies, PayPal on the network. They're not connected to us. They're connected through their bank relationship to us, right? But they're a network that's leveraging our network to facilitate the way theirs works, right? So RTP augments the capabilities that products like that can offer and companies like TabaPay can provide.
Perfect. Thank you, Keith. Okay, the next question is from David Berkowitz. Does TabaPay have the technology for lower cost routing on RTP or ACH? I know that we do it for CardState. Can you talk a little bit about that, Rodney?
So lower cost routing over RTP is lower cost routing typically applies to the payment networks. You want to route a transaction to the lowest cost network. RTP is a singular network, so there's no lower cost, there's faster speed. And so we offer faster speed routing. And if you call our bank query API, you'll find out how you can route it instantly, right? If you have a routing number, you can certainly find out the fastest way to route that and do so. But cost, 4.5 cents for everything, you can't, there's no lower cost with RTP.
And how about between networks? So can a merchant switch between, call it ACH, RTP cards, and we sort of route to the lowest network there?
So certainly the merchant, if they have a bank credential, they can switch their APIs between RTP, same day ACH, or next day ACH. They can absolutely do that with the bank credential. They can either specify R, S, or N in the API, and that's how you do real time, same day, next day. Cards, of course, needs additional credentials, and so it'd be hard to switch between RTP and card, but RTP and the ACH flavors are very easy.
Perfect. Thank you, Rodney. Okay, and then a question for Keith is, we've seen a lot of press around FedNow recently, and I think some people do see it as a competitive instant payment system. And so, Keith, I want to get your thoughts on sort of FedNow and how you see it in terms of competition.
So, and there's a lot of history around the whole development of the FedNow initiative. The bottom line is the Fed decided a year plus ago to offer some type of competing network. We don't know what it's going to look like yet. They're just still in the design stage. They should be releasing something pretty soon as far as what exactly it's going to be and how it's going to work. Their current time frame is, I think, 2024. By the end of 2024, might be a little earlier, with a lower functional type of a network. But there will be 2 real-time networks. And the question is, can 2 real-time networks interoperate the way the 2 ACH networks interoperate? For the industry's sake, that would be the biggest benefit. We're not sure if that's possible. We've been very close with the Fed on their technical teams and ours as far as figuring out how to make it work. We're not since we don't know what they're doing exactly yet, we can't commit to saying that's going to work. We're working with them to try, and I guess from an industry standpoint, we will see. I mean, I was asked what's the main difference between RTP and FedNow, and probably a little bit of a smart aleck answer, but well, RTP exists now and is being used now. So 2 years is a long time. The world will change a couple of times by then, probably. But from a RTP standpoint, we should be at 80 or 90% coverage across the country by the time FedNow launches. So it'll be interesting to see what the impact of that. We'll see. It remains to be seen, is all I can say.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you, Keith. And then a question for Rodney in terms of if merchants are interested in this process, what does onboarding look like and what are sort of next steps? I know Aaron touched on a little bit of that in the slides.
Yeah, so it's pretty straightforward. You can request sandbox access on Monday, get into the sandbox. We probably just want to do a quick technical review to make sure you're calling the right APIs, and then we'll get you an addendum, and that's it. It's actually pretty straightforward for an existing customer to get live.
Great. Okay. And I'll just open up for any last questions in the Q&A, and thank you so much for those who posted questions. Any last questions we want answered? Okay. If not, well, thank you. So, one last question, it seems like. So in terms of corporate payments, can we speak to, will TabaPay support TCH deposit warehouse for corporate payments? And I'll give that over to Rodney.
The answer is yes, but out of the gate, no. We're focused in the first instance of this of letting our current merchants disperse to consumers and businesses. So we're supporting, we aren't supporting the extended messaging capability inside the clearinghouse messages, but we are going to be doing that for B2B payments. Just this first launch is not focused on that. Okay.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. We really appreciate our customers, our partners for taking the time. I know an hour out of everyone's day is difficult, but hopefully you guys learned quite a lot about RTP. If you have any questions at all, feel free to contact us, the panelists, or our email help@tabapay.com. And we hope you have a good day. Thanks so much for joining. And thank you so much to the panelists for taking the time.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.